He never showed his face. No photos. No fingerprints. No real name. But his empire was bigger than most cartels. The only clue authorities had was a username buried deep inside an encrypted forum, Cypher_King. What started as an anonymous account soon became the gateway to the most dangerous corner of the internet. Governments were clueless. Until one message leaked, and the hunt began. He wasn't born into crime. He built it, bit by bit, keystroke by keystroke, until he became the most feared name in the darkest corners of the internet. In the early days, he was just another teenager with a second-hand laptop and a fascination for breaking things that weren't meant to be broken. Firewalls, bank logins, school servers. It didn't matter what it was, he just wanted to prove he could. But what began as digital mischief evolved quickly. He learned that chaos could be monetized. And when he discovered the hidden ecosystem of the dark web, he vanished from the surface web entirely, reborn as Cypher_King. Cypher_King wasn't just a username. It was a signature, a warning, a brand. In a digital world ruled by fear and anonymity, he was king because no one could touch him, and no one knew who he was. He didn't sell drugs himself. He didn't hack bank accounts. He didn't deliver weapons or stolen passports. But he created the platform where everyone else could. And that made him more powerful than the criminals who supplied the goods. He controlled the marketplace, the logistics, the encryption layers, and, most importantly, the trust. He launched the network in total silence. No flashy announcements. No marketing. Just a whisper in elite hacker forums that a new encrypted bazaar had emerged, one that made the infamous Silk Road look like a schoolyard drug ring. It was clean. Minimal. Built on custom code that even cybersecurity experts couldn't crack. No login page unless you knew the precise time to access it. No passwords. Everything was run through cascading layers of onion routing and time-based authentication. And then there was the kill switch, a function that would wipe everything in seconds should the system detect a trace or infiltration attempt. Cypher_King's genius wasn't just technical. It was psychological. He designed his marketplace like a fortress of paranoia. Sellers had to earn access through reputation and invitation. Every transaction required multi-step verification and rotating wallets. He created a point system for credibility, where the most trusted dealers were rewarded with higher visibility, but only after months of error-free trades. Anyone caught scamming, cheating, or drawing attention to themselves was instantly blacklisted by the system. Their identities were partially doxed. Their crypto drained. Their reputations destroyed. It was a brutal economy of fear and control. But fear in the dark web is currency. And people paid well to feel safe under the king's rule. His network, called Nocturna, became a haven for the worst of humanity, human traffickers, arms dealers, rogue hackers for hire. But what set Nocturna apart wasn't just its scale, it was the way it operated like a legitimate corporation. There were tiers of access. Admins, moderators, encrypted help desks, technical support, refund policies, multilingual guides for international criminals. All of it operated 24/7. People said it was smoother than Amazon. Only instead of books and gadgets they were buying fentanyl AK-47s and forged identities. And still no one had seen the king. Rumors swirled. Some said he lived off-grid in Eastern Europe. Others claimed he was a former NSA coder who'd gone rogue. A few believed he wasn't even real, just a myth propped up by a council of cybercriminals to instill fear. But those closest to the network, the ones who had been vetted and allowed deeper into the folds, knew there was a real mind behind it. The way decisions were made. The timing. The updates. The personalized warnings sent to sellers just seconds before law enforcement took down rival sites. This wasn't run by a group. It was run by someone with vision and discipline. He never used email. Never used phones. All communications happened through time-locked encrypted messages on a decentralized platform he had built himself. Even the admins didn't know who they worked for. They called him CK. And when CK spoke, they listened. Orders were followed. Protocols were executed. Mistakes were punished. The FBI had heard of him. So had Interpol, Europol, and nearly every major intelligence agency in the world. But for years they had nothing. No IP logs. No crypto wallets they could freeze. No voice. No face. The only hard evidence of his existence was metadata fragments scraped from user complaints and vague error logs, none of which could be traced. And yet, his influence kept growing. It wasn't just criminal marketplaces anymore. He began launching secondary services, encrypted communications for hire, secure data drops, ransomware kits, ghost hosting services, and fake identity bundles that could survive airport security and banking systems. He wasn't just enabling crime. He was rewriting the architecture of the underworld. To those within the dark web, Cypher_King wasn't a villain. He was a provider, a protector. A faceless savior who gave them tools to escape surveillance and the reach of governments. He was mythologized, even respected. Some called him the first emperor of the digital black market. But to the agencies watching from the surface, he was a ticking bomb, one that needed to be disarmed before it went nuclear. They had no idea where to start. Until one night, someone close to the king made a mistake. A transaction timestamp that didn't match the usual pattern. A user ID that had been inactive for years suddenly logged in using an older version of Nocturna's core. And then a file, an unencrypted message, surfaced in a forgotten part of a hidden server. The message was unsigned. No names. Just a cryptic line of code referencing Project Phaeton. No one in law enforcement had heard of it before. But in the world Cypher_King had built, that single anomaly was enough to raise alarms. And just like that, the hunt began. It started with a misclick. A simple mistake buried in the code of an otherwise flawless operation. One of Cypher_King's trusted lieutenants, known only by the handle Zero Divide, had been using a private, untraceable relay network to manage transactions within Nocturna. But in a moment of distraction, or perhaps arrogance, he rerouted a payment confirmation through an unsecured node, exposing an IP packet that wasn't fully anonymized. It was a glitch. A hiccup in an otherwise perfect system. But to a team of analysts inside the FBI's cyber division, it was gold. The IP address led nowhere directly. It pinged through a dozen proxy layers, each designed to confuse, mislead, and circle back. But something was different this time. One fragment of metadata had embedded a timestamp that coincided with a known encrypted forum post made by Cypher_King just hours earlier. The content of the message itself was cryptic. A single word, Phaeton. That word hadn't meant anything to the agents at the time, but the digital trail left in its wake opened the first real crack in a fortress of encrypted silence. The operation, now codenamed GhostNet, went into overdrive. Teams in Washington, Berlin, and The Hague began parsing logs, correlating dark web activity with dormant server addresses and cross-referencing behavior patterns. Cypher_King had been careful, but even digital ghosts leave fingerprints, tiny artifacts that accumulate over time. It wasn't one mistake they were after. It was a pattern. A rhythm. And after years of watching, they had enough fragments to see the edges of the puzzle. But they needed more. They turned their attention to Zero Divide. Whoever he was, he wasn't as disciplined as Cypher_King. Over the years, he had participated in smaller, less secure operations, ones the agencies had archived and forgotten. One in particular was a ransomware campaign that had hit a private biotech firm in Estonia 5 years ago. The encryption method used was crude by Nocturna's standards, but a rare string in the executable file matched a more recent module seen inside one of the King's latest platform updates. It was a shared digital signature, like matching handwriting in two anonymous letters. That was the opening. The FBI worked with Estonian authorities to unseal a frozen blockchain wallet connected to that old ransomware campaign. Inside was a transfer, exactly 0.0021 Bitcoin, sent not to pay ransom but as a test transaction. The address it was sent from was now inactive, but that test pattern had been repeated in at least 3 other unrelated cyber incidents across Europe. Each of those wallets, once thought random, were now believed to be touchpoints, heartbeats, a way for Cypher_King to test new operatives without them ever knowing they were being evaluated. Interpol began constructing a relationship map, node by node, linking these microtransactions to larger operations. Arms deals in Moldova, synthetic drug distribution networks in Brazil, identity forgeries out of Malaysia. At the center of it all were silent users. Names no one could connect to faces. But one stood out. A user called Spectre Signal had interacted with Zero Divide in the old ransomware channels and again in a dark web forum related to Nocturna's rise. Spectre Signal had only posted once. One line of text: "The night is quietest before the breach." The post had been signed with a PGP key, one the NSA's decryption unit had been chasing for almost 6 years. It had shown up once before in a communication linked to a known cyber terrorist who disappeared after a failed assassination attempt on a Balkan diplomat. That thread had gone cold until now. Now they had a common digital signature, a phrase, and an IP anomaly all pointing toward a small radius in Central Europe. Operation GhostNet shifted its focus to a specific location, the outskirts of Prague. Surveillance drones began monitoring traffic patterns. Thermal scans revealed abnormal heat signatures below a seemingly abandoned warehouse. Digital breadcrumbs pointed toward localized signal spikes, brief, infrequent, but always following a pattern that matched Nocturna's internal update cycles. The king wasn't just operating remotely anymore. He had gone underground, literally, and the bunker they believed was his war room. To avoid tipping him off, the agencies planted their own user into Nocturna under a fabricated identity. The persona, Nullbird, offered something too tempting to resist: a zero-day vulnerability for a widely used military-grade encryption chip. It was fake but convincing, crafted in collaboration with real engineers and embedded with misleading yet technical details that only a high-level player would understand. The offer was posted in a private seller vetting forum inside Nocturna. Within 6 hours, a reply came back, not from an alias but from the king's system itself. The reply was machine-formatted but distinct, concise, authoritative, and signed with a fresh PGP key tied to the phrase Project Phaeton. That name again. Agents now understood it wasn't just a code name, it was part of the king's blueprint. Phaeton, in mythology, was the son of the sun god who flew too close to Earth and nearly destroyed the world. A metaphor. A message. The king saw himself as a force, capable of burning everything down if mishandled. The message also included a condition: meet conditions. Deliver in-person validation. Or don't return. It was a trap. But it was also an opportunity. The agencies now knew one critical thing: the king wanted something physical. Something tangible. That meant he was willing to meet, or at least use a channel traceable to a physical location. The digital ghost had stepped a toe into the real world. Now all they had to do was pull him through the screen. A new plan formed: a fake delivery, a secure courier, and a hidden tracking module embedded in a custom decryption dongle. It would be sent to the king under the guise of Nullbird. It would either expose his location, or trigger his kill switch. But either way, the game had changed. The hunt was no longer theoretical. It had become real. The device was delivered on a rainy night, passed hand to hand through 5 layers of intermediaries before it finally reached the heart of the operation. Each courier knew only one thing: deliver the sealed package, confirm the password at drop-off, and disappear. No questions. No contact. No deviations. What none of them knew was that hidden inside the device, an innocuous black thumb drive resembling thousands of others, was a nano-tracker unlike anything previously deployed. It wouldn't emit signals. It wouldn't connect to satellites. Instead, it relied on electromagnetic proximity detection, mapping its environment, reading server frequencies, identifying patterns, and piggybacking off passive signals to broadcast location data through brief, coded bursts. The trap had been set. The signal came 32 hours later. A burst, tiny but enough. The pinpoint location triangulated to a decommissioned fallout shelter just outside Prague. From the outside, it looked like little more than a forgotten relic of the Cold War. Rusted gates, cracked concrete, ivy swallowing the perimeter. But underground it was something else entirely. Operation GhostNet activated its final phase. An elite cyberforensics team was flown in and prepped on site. Digital infiltration would begin first. Surveillance bots would assess internal data flows and confirm the presence of Nocturna source servers. If confirmed, tactical agents would follow. The risk was massive. Cypher King was infamous for lacing his infrastructure with digital self-destruct mechanisms. One wrong line of code or unexpected breach could trigger a full wipe of everything. The team launched a low-level scan. The signal returned static, then a ripple. Data was flowing. The architecture inside was dense, complex, and beautifully engineered. Server clusters arranged in isolated nodes, each feeding into encrypted silos. The system was alive. But not just functioning, it was evolving. The AI inside the network had begun adapting, responding to probe signals with false exits, honeypots, and digital booby traps. It wasn't just defense. It was an active countermeasure. Then they saw it. A process log surfaced. Time-stamped and system-coded. The entry read, Phaeton, Stage 3. It wasn't just a code label. It was a trigger. Agents realized with growing dread that they were inside a countdown. One they didn't start and one they couldn't stop. Every second became critical. A stealth algorithm was deployed to mirror the server logs and divert the system's attention. Meanwhile, the physical breach began above ground. Black SUVs rolled up in silence. Communication was cut to nearby towers. Power grids rerouted. Entry would have to be swift, surgical. The team descended through the main tunnel, bypassing primitive booby traps, infrared triggers, and motion sensors. At the core of the facility they found it, the command center. Dozens of custom-built machines stacked and humming. Server lights blinking in rhythm like a heartbeat. But something was missing. The chair was empty. No figure hunched behind the glowing monitors. No mastermind screaming threats or pleading for mercy. Just a black hoodie draped over the backrest, a pair of headphones lying still on the desk, and a monitor blinking with a command prompt awaiting input. They had reached the heart of the kingdom, but the king wasn't there. Suddenly, an alert flashed. Every machine in the bunker began syncing. Files zipped. Logs encrypted. Drives began spinning into overdrive. One by one, the server towers started to heat up, their LED indicators turning blood red. The final phase had begun. The team initiated a data dump protocol, copying everything they could before it was gone forever. But Nocturna had a kill script unlike anything they'd seen before. It wasn't just deleting files. It was rewriting them, masking their origin, embedding traps in the metadata, destroying every chain of evidence on the fly. In a moment of desperation, the lead forensics analyst grabbed a nearby laptop, plugged in a secure external drive, and bypassed the mainframe's interface. He ran a terminal command blind, one designed to clone volatile memory in real time. For 4 minutes, the drive whirred, heat building, sweat dripping from his brow. And then the servers died. One after another. As if someone somewhere had flipped a switch. Silence fell. The team evacuated with what little they had salvaged. Back at the mobile command center, the drive was decrypted. The contents were chaotic, partial, but something had survived. Not just code. Not just logs. But video. Encrypted video. One of the servers had been running a secure feed loop. A visual log meant for remote auditing. The footage was grainy, low resolution, distorted by scrambling tech. But in the center of the frame was a figure. Unremarkable. But it gloved. Face blurred by real-time scrambling software. But in his movements there was something clinical. Precise. At one point he looked into the camera. Not by accident. Deliberately. As if he knew someone would be watching one day. And then he raised a card toward the lens. Handwritten. One sentence. You were never hunting me. I was watching you. That message shattered the room's confidence. Analysts stared at each other in disbelief. The king knew. From the beginning. The entire sting, the false deal, the planted courier, even the final breach. It had all been part of his game. He had orchestrated his own takedown. Or perhaps, a decoy. As more of the footage was analyzed, inconsistencies emerged. The timestamps had been backdated. The machine ID signatures were mismatched. The drives had been swapped days before the raid. The bunker wasn't his base, it was a shell. A mirror designed to feed just enough truth to make them believe the hunt had ended. But it hadn't. The final image recovered from the drive was an animation. An ASCII phoenix, wings outstretched, flames trailing behind. Below it, a single file name, phaeton.exe. The file could not be opened. It remains to this day in a secure vault, monitored by 3 agencies and untouched, for fear it might contain the next iteration of his code. The world believes Cypher_King is gone. But those who were closest to the case know better. The king of the dark web wasn't captured. He vanished, on his own terms, with one final message written not in code but in action. Control everything. Leave nothing behind. And always stay ahead of the hunt.